The nonfiction book tag. I confess that when Randy of Literate Texan tagged me to do this, I didn't think I would be able to participate. The very first question of the tag is, what originally made you interested in reading nonfiction? And my immediate answer was, I'm not interested in reading nonfiction, by which I mean I don't seek it out the way I seek out fiction. Most of what is behind me is fiction or poetry. But I took a closer look at my shelves and realized I actually still do have a surprising number of nonfiction books. So I think I will be able to participate in this tag. But now I'm going to have to start with question 2, which is, do you read nonfiction mainly for curiosity, learning, or enjoyment? Well, I'd say these are very close together. Curiosity and learning come close together for me. And when I'm learning something and satisfying my curiosity, I'm enjoying myself very much. And when I'm curious about something and have to learn it because it's new, it usually has something to do with a hobby I've decided to take up. And one of those hobbies was knitting. And although my primary source of knitting resources is still in the online world, through blogs or through patterns available online, I also did a bit of browsing and found the Knitting Life List by Gwen W. Steege. So think of this as the knitter's equivalent of 1,000 books to read before you die. So as you see, 1,001 knitting inspirations. Now, I'm not as ambitious about my knitting as I am about my reading. So I'm kind of happy with my functional number of knitting skills and the limited number of projects that I've mastered. But even though I don't plan to go through all 1,001 knitting inspirations, it was still a really nice resource. I got some helpful tips out of it. And who knows, maybe someday I'll realize I do want to knit a Shetland sweater, and this will come in handy in another way. Question number 3, what topic could you read endless nonfiction about? Honestly, a really good Catholic devotional, especially if it's a classic that has stood the test of time. So the representative for that would be Introduction to the Devout Life, or Philothea by St. Francis de Sales. This was pretty good. I'm just not a huge fan of this particular translation. I do have a small bunch of Catholic spiritual classics, which you don't really see because they're blocked by my head when I make these videos. And funnily enough, when I told my confessor that I was planning to start a booktube channel, and he is someone who is notorious for being down on social media, all he said was, oh, maybe you could review some books on the saints. And I thought, okay. Question number 4, how do you usually discover nonfiction books? Since I don't really seek them out myself, I discover them when browsing the bookcases of my friends, when I visit their houses, or when those friends give them to me as gifts. And that was the case with Conversations on Love by Natasha, Lunn. And funnily enough, the friend who gave me this, when I told her that I was starting a booktube channel, and not just that, but I was becoming more intentional about my reading again and setting reading challenges for myself, she said, oh, good, I may actually finally be able to get you to read nonfiction. And then she gave me this as a Christmas present. I haven't started it yet. Question 5, do you follow authors or topics when choosing nonfiction? Yes. And I know that contradicts everything I just said about not seeking out nonfiction, but there are some authors who managed to hook me and whose books I decided to seek out. And one of them was G.K. Chesterton. I became pretty obsessed with Chesterton right before I went to university, and luckily my university library had a bunch of books by him, a lot of old editions. The only reason I don't have my own set of Chesterton nonfiction is that I read them all in the university library. This is obviously not an early edition of The Everlasting Man. I think I have it because a friend who was clearing out an old house so that it could be sold to a new owner needed to clear out a lot of old books. And this was there, and I thought I really loved it when I read it in university. I read it twice in university, so I might as well get my own copy. Question number 6. What nonfiction book stayed with you long after reading? That's easy. It has been an answer for over 25 years. It is The Law by Frédéric Bastiat, which I think was originally a pamphlet when he wrote it. This was, I was going to say, my political awakening, but maybe not quite, though this has really left a stamp on the way I think about modern politics. Despite being a pretty thin book, it has got a lot packed into it, kind of like, I guess, a papal encyclical. A good papal encyclical, not a word salad papal encyclical. I'm not naming names, but the one who wrote some really good ones was Pope Leo XIII. Highly recommend it. Okay, but I would say one idea that really stuck with me after reading The Law was the rhetorical question: if people aren't smart enough to govern themselves, then how can we say they're smart enough to choose representatives to govern them? That stayed with me. Question 7. What topic have you learned about most through books? I don't know if this is a topic as much as it is, I guess, an area of study, but I would say psychology and therapy. And what's funny is that the therapists who wrote books that were most helpful to me no longer have their books in my collection, because I eventually, when curating my books, thought, okay, I don't really need this anymore. But that's actually a compliment to them. It means that they helped me and that it was effective, and I moved on. I've heard critiques of modern therapy where someone says it's as if the therapist wants you to remain unwell, wants you to keep going back and keep needing therapy, and you never actually get better. And that was not my experience reading those psychology books. So, if you're not unhauling your therapist after a few years, maybe, you should find another therapist. But one of the books that, well, I didn't keep it, but I read it before, and then it came back to me when a friend wanted to send me something by courier. I think it was money, but because it's dangerous to do that, the friend stuck it in a book, and it turned out to be one of the books I read before and actually think is worth another read because it has some really beautiful prose, and that is Care of the Soul by Thomas More. It's about rituals that we do not to cure ourselves, but to care for ourselves. It's about the stories we tell about ourselves and about our families. It's about embracing the shadow side of the most positive things in our lives. I'd be able to be more specific once I reread this, but until then, I have good memories of it, and I look forward to a time I can sit down and read it again. Question 8. What nonfiction book made you curious about something unexpected? I would say that was The Roman Way by Edith Hamilton, whom you probably know best from Hamilton's mythology. In this, she shares a lot about ancient Rome, the ancient Roman approach to life and philosophy and entertainment. And what I found most interesting was the chapter on Roman drama. We don't have the full plays, but the fragments we do have reveal that the Romans had a fondness for characters who were slaves. This was interesting to me because it was unexpected. It was a contradiction. We don't really expect, slave owners to be interested in entertainment in which the character who is the slave owner is depicted as a kind of buffoon, while the slave is the smartest, bravest, most resourceful character who brings about the happy ending. And then they watch it, they enjoy it, and they go home and they mistreat their slaves. But I read this book while the MCU movies were coming out, and in particular, the MCU movies with Tom Holland as Peter Parker. And suddenly they fit together. I think that an ancient Roman would watch those movies and think, oh, yeah, Tony Stark, Iron Man, is the slave owner figure, and Peter Parker is the slave figure. It's obviously not a clean parallel, but it was an interesting way to shine a classical lens on some really modern entertainment. Question 9. What topic would you recommend everybody explore at least once? I really had to think about this one, especially since I was relating it to the books that I have. And I think I actually came up with a really good answer, which is food. Food, especially as it relates to culture. You may not be interested in nonfiction for the sake of nonfiction, but I bet you're interested in food. So, and to represent that idea is A Taste of Home, Pinoy Expats, and Food Memories. So these are collected essays by Filipinos who have moved abroad and what they do to make themselves feel less homesick in the kitchen. This is another one that's due a reread. So pick the cuisine you're most interested in and read about its history, read about its cultural impact. I'm sure it'll be interesting. Question 10. What nonfiction book would you recommend to curious readers? This was a little hard to answer because it makes me want to ask, well, what are they curious about? But if that's the only prompt I have to go with, well, then this is my answer. I'm going with Culture and History by Joaquin. Now, Joaquin is like G.K. Chesterton. If I see his name on a book and I haven't read it yet, I will buy it and read it. And Culture and History is a collection of essays about, obviously, Philippine culture and Philippine history. And this really changed the way I looked at the Philippines past. Hey guys, it's future me doing my editing, and I can't believe I forgot to mention the reason why Nick Joaquin changed my view of the past. He was pretty positive on colonization. I know it's not popular, and a lot of modern historians just condemn it as a matter of course, but he had some good reasons for defending it. And I've mentioned this to a couple of people who also dislike the blanket condemnation of colonization, and they were surprised he went that far. He went that far in his defense, but I don't think he's an extremist. He he makes his case really well, and I still think about a lot of the points he made, even though it's been over 10 years since I read Culture and History. So, if you would like an alternative view of a colonial past from someone who descended from a colonized people, well, he's your guy, and Culture and History is your book. Finally, question 11. What nonfiction book would you recommend to someone who does not like nonfiction? Well, I'd have to go with The Bed of Procrustes by Nassim Taleb. It's pretty easy to read because it's all aphorisms. And he recommends reading them at random, reading no more than 4 a day. I think that even if you don't like nonfiction, you can commit to that. Let's read one. Multiplicative generosity. Limit your generosity to those who, in turn, given the circumstances, would be equally generous toward others. Okay, that's something to think about. So that's it. Those are my answers to the nonfiction tag questions. I hope you found this post entertaining and maybe found recommendations that you would like to read as well. I thought this was an interesting challenge because it showed me how much I actually do appreciate nonfiction when I would have said, and my friend would have said, that I don't. So I guess now the next challenge is to incorporate more nonfiction into my reading, not because it's a should, but because I have genuinely liked it and enjoyed some authors and have gotten a lot out of it. I am not really good at tagging people. I felt that everyone I did a shout out to the last time I mentioned people in a video are basically my only friends. So if you were included in the shout out, consider yourself tagged unless you'd rather not be tagged. Well, thank you for watching.